think we should come up with a name for this. I think this is turning into a podcast, Faye. Welcome back. If this is your first time here, I'm Jason, and with me is Faye. Um, and today, just I guess some background information. We're with Defend, a nonprofit looking to reduce risks for children and vulnerable people online. If you want to learn more on how to protect children and vulnerable people online, go to our website, Google us, Help Us Defend, or HelpUsDefend.com. Today, we are going to be reacting to another video. This is a news story. I have kept Faye in the dark about this, and we're going to do some live She's got her reacting glasses on. We're going to do some reacting to a topical news story, something that you have probably seen here on YouTube, although I don't know that this is the intention of the person who is the subject of the story. How are things today, Faye?
Pretty good.
Good.
Plodding on.
All right. So coming up on screen here is is a piece from Law and Crime Sidebar with Jesse Weber. We're going to react to this. And yeah, I'll just let it play for a second.
It never ends well when someone tries to take the law into their own hands, and that is allegedly what happened
in Texas. A man is accused of luring out and murdering a child pornography convict in cold blood. Who better to break this story down with than renowned predator catcher Chris Hansen? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Vigilante justice? It's not something just from comic books. No, it seems maybe life, unfortunately, is imitating art. We go to Houston, Texas, where 37-year-old Sean Connery Showers, no relation to the James Bond actor, was found shot to death back on May 29th, 2023. Found dead in a ditch. Police said that Showers was walking along the roadway when, quote, a vehicle of unknown make and model approached him. Someone inside the vehicle then shot him. Now, here's an important point, very important point. Showers had actually served time in federal prison for possession of child pornography. Yeah, reporting indicates he spent 30 months behind bars. Then he apparently also failed to register as a sex offender, which got him 2 years also in jail in 2019.
So, Faye, I don't know if you're aware, but there are a lot of these groups on YouTube in particular that go around and film experiences where they pretend to be a child on the internet, and then they broadcast this. Usually it is for fame. They pretend to be a child, and then they meet up with what they say is, somebody who is a predator. And all the time that kind of goes to them suspecting that this person is actually minor attracted. And now this is not a story about that. It doesn't, I mean, they don't go into that, but it could be that this person, and I don't know for sure, was a part of this kind of quote unquote movement on YouTube of exposing predation like this online. But what are your first thoughts?
Well, I mean, they're not exposing predation. They are sort of luring into a trap someone who's already served their justice for their offences. So the thing that they're saying that they're doing is sort of the opposite. And then in regards to child sexploitation media offences, it's a real grey area because a lot of different circumstances and situations and personal difficulties of an individual can change their normal behaviour and can really affect how they are and what they do. And I think there needs to be a lot of understanding around people with learning difficulties, people on the autistic spectrum, people with disorders where they are trying to navigate an online world and themselves and their difficulties, and possibly with other things as well in play, like if they are not a child, if they're not a paedophile or sexually attracted to children, then there could be something else also driving that behaviour that's not being met as well, because men's issues really are not met very well. And there's a lot of sort of groups that make that meeting even less and less and less. Black men, autistic men, disabled men, men with learning difficulties, and all of these groups, men with depression, you know, that men with feelings, you know, all of these things are all sidewinded and not met in empathy that says, you know, when you're under extreme stress, you can act out, and one of the easiest ways is on the internet, and you can get down very dark paths very quickly, and with different things. Sorry.
And that's not even speaking to like the justice system and what prison time could actually do to somebody's psyche. You know,
Right. Well, and also the police would say, we do not want you to do this. Like, they actively state it's not just unhelpful, it wastes police time. Like,
you're talking about these investigations, these sting
Right.
operations
Right.
from groups,
Right.
right?
Yeah. So the content makers making money from these atrocities and injuries and all of this trauma, raking it up with absolutely no good intention, because they aren't investigating someone who's actively doing something. They're luring people in a very unfair way that some people can really be a victim to, even with the behavior that they end up demonstrating. You know, and we have to have a lot of ability to open up that empathy to realize why men are acting out like this.
So the context here is I think important, but generally I would say that there is another opinion coming in here. There's a surprise guest that I think the host hasn't announced yet, but I know who's coming up, and I really want to kind of get a sense of how this shifts perhaps after this additional person comes on.
And that is what leads me into the potential motive into his killing. You see, police have now just arrested 24-year-old James Lewis Spencer III and charged him with Shower's murder. According to court documents, a, quote, third party told authorities that Spencer, quote, believed the police were not doing enough to keep pedophiles incarcerated, and the defendant wanted to rob and harm those type of men, that they would do bad things to little children and other people. These filings go on to say, quote, a month later, defendant made some comment that if the cops were not going to do anything, maybe he should kill them himself. And it seems that is what he may have done, because cell phone communications between Showers and Spencer, they were apparently communicating over an app, indicates that there was a discussion about Showers' history with minors, and that the defendant allegedly lured Showers into a meetup with him by pretending to be a child, only to then shoot him to death. Now, the documents indicate that Spencer's cell phone tracked him to and from the murder location. So a case of someone literally taking the law into their own hands, crazy to think about. And Spencer now faces up to life in prison if convicted. Let me bring in somebody who, I will tell you, the first person that came to my mind when I heard this story, somebody who knows something about catching predators, not killing them. Renowned journalist Chris Hansen, host of Takedown on True Blue and the podcast Predators I've Caught with Chris Hansen. Chris, good to see you. My gosh, what's your reaction to this?
Yeah, boy, this is one of those, Jesse, where I'd like to see all the police files on it, because What we don't know here, excuse me, is whether or not there was some pre-existing relationship or knowledge between the defendant and the suspect in this case. Was there an incident? Did the shooter, the alleged shooter, know a victim, or was this just straight up vigilanteism? And it appears right now that it was straight up vigilante.
Now, this movement of doing this kind of activity likely could be as a result, ironically, from people emulating or wanting to kind of fashion themselves after a Chris Hansen. I'm sure you know who Chris Hansen is, okay?
I don't.
Oh, you don't? You're like sitting there stunned. You're like, I don't even know who this is. Like, Chris Hansen is the most famous quote unquote predator catcher on ever. He
Oh my goodness, right.
To catch a predator from NBC from the 1990s and 2000s. They would set up.
Oh, I do vaguely remember that. I don't think I've seen any of his stuff and I don't recognize him, but I vaguely remember that title.
Oh yeah, okay. So they would get a house and they would have like a police force there and they would have cameras all inside the house.
Oh my gosh.
And then they would have a female actor pretending to be, an adult female who was pretending to be a child home alone. And then the predator would come and say, oh, hey, how you doing? I brought a pizza or I brought whatever, and let's get busy. And then suddenly Chris Hansen would step out and say, hey, you're not having relations with this young lady. Why are you here? This is the kind of thing that Chris Hansen is famous for. And what I will suggest most of these predator catching groups on YouTube are inspired by. And I'm not saying
he would have the police working with him, like that. Surely.
Oh yeah. Chris Hansen would pretty much always have the police there. The police would be like in the garage hiding, and then after Chris Hansen.
What decade was this?
Sorry?
What decade was this all in?
This is the end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s. The series To Catch a Predator was on NBC, which is a North American or a US TV station, but it's famous worldwide. If you just Google or go into YouTube looking for these past episodes, they're all there.
Oh, I will. Maybe we should do a look back.
And it's a huge project that spanned I don't know. I think it was maybe 10 years. I think maybe they
gained convictions from it.
Yes.
Was there any beneficence to it?
Yes. They had lots of convictions, and they basically, would do this in different cities. They would have like 30 men at a time going to one house over like a 2 or 3 day period, and then they would just put out a press release, and then they would put this into a TV show. So it was a TV show. It's the most famous TV show of its kind.
Wow.
And when this was airing in its decade, I believe the story or the event that caused it to stop was one of these predators. One of these presumed predators didn't show up to a meeting, and then they went to storm his house with the police, and he was found dead as a result of unaliving himself.
Right.
So that's To Catch a Predator, and he's been doing it since. Even though NBC stopped that show, Chris Hansen has continued on with this. He even has a podcast called predators I've caught or something like that.
I really thought that it was illegal to, or it wasn't, you couldn't, gain any evidence of something if you were actively conning someone. And I didn't think that it was able to go to trial if it had that sort of evidence. But
some of the legalities of that have been tested in court, and I'm sure some people's constitutional rights were challenged or even breached. But I can't speak for all of the cases. I've only seen a handful of these. But what I think is really interesting, though, is that we're now looking at sort of the face. This is the guy, I believe, who is responsible
for the propaganda of the original swathe of "this is our bias."
Well, no, this guy on screen right here. This
Oh, right.
is the person that's under arrest for allegedly committing this heinous act against someone else. Basically, alleged to have taken the law into their own hands. And now this law and crime show is basically, putting Hansen up on a pedestal, basically, saying that you're the king of catching these predators online, basically.
That this guy who's been charged with this crime became aware of this guy who apparently was active at one point with child pornography and maybe talking to children online. And in fact, went undercover, so to speak, to set up a meeting, and then he killed this guy. Now, this is different, Jesse, than some of the other vigilantes.
It's alleged that he's killed him. This person has just been arrested and charged. And it should be noted, I don't think he says he killed this guy, but we don't know that for sure. This person is presumed innocent until found guilty.
And they seem in sort of the celebrant of that, like he's done something that they would agree with, type thing. It's like a
I think I think the minutia of them kind of getting into it, I think that changes.
Making jokes about it and everything, sort of at the beginning.
Yeah, it changes tone a little bit, I think.
Many groups who expose these guys, and while I question some of those vigilantes' tactics and have been critical of them because the cases are often not prosecuted, this is a whole different situation. This is a guy who, is accused at least of setting a guy up to, by his own previous statements, rob or to kill them. And that takes this to a whole different level. And clearly, this is extreme, it's wrong, and that's why he's being prosecuted. No matter, how unlikable the victim was or what the victim had done in his past, we are a society of laws, and we need to stick with those laws when we prosecute these predators. But this takes it to a whole other objectionable level. And when I saw this, we immediately started talking about it here at True Blue and just kind of shook our heads like, what was this guy thinking? How in any way is this appropriate, no matter what this guy did for a living?
I'm glad there is rationale. Rationale.
But I mean, I find it very ironic that he is saying this. What is this guy?
He's literally undoing all of his own sort of propaganda that he's put out, because actually none of it gets to justice because it's not effective evidence by the way that it was collected, but also that he's now saying it's not, for it to lead to this level, to this extreme, he's realizing that isn't acceptable, shouldn't be, platformed or encouraged or celebrated or, pom-pommed as some kind of hero who's got one of them off the earth,
Right. I mean, I think most people will see the irony in that Hansen here is sort of the inspiration for this kind of activity, setting someone up. And here he is basically wagging his finger.
Well, he's trying to sanitize himself from it, which I'm not sure he is allowed to do in his history.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and you've echoed exactly what the prosecutor in this case has said. Rahaman Merchant, quote, regardless of the likability of the victim, we're a nation of laws, so no one gets to be judge, jury, and executioner depending on how they feel. Have you ever seen anything like this before? Have you ever seen anybody taking matters into their own hands regarding, convicted child predators or people who are convicted of sex crimes like this? Anybody who's like, I'm gonna beat them up, I'm gonna kill them. Have you ever seen anything like this?
We've seen historically, Jesse, cases where children have been killed or assaulted, and parents may have tried to get a gun in the courtroom. And there have been cases historically where parents have sought to kill or have killed in retribution. And I understand the emotion. I mean, I've covered these cases for 40 some years as a journalist, and some horrific cases targeting children. And I understand that the emotion and the feeling to get retribution, to seek some sort of justice, even though it would be considered vengeance.
I also find it interesting that he calls himself a journalist.
Yeah.
He is technically a journalist by trade, and he was working on a news magazine show that is still very popular, but the kind of journalism that this is sort of a hybrid from what most journalism is. Most journalism doesn't involve itself in diving into stuff of illegality like this
And entrapment.
from a perspective of like hidden camera type expose.
Yeah.
And he was really sort of the grandfather for this for the evolution of reality TV and for other types of programming similar to this. And I find it really fascinating to hear him kind of say that, because I find that, and
he's sort of realizing where it sort of has reached, where it went to, all of his decade of sort of platforming that propaganda, of that sort of hatred, and we have every right to harass and entrap and go after people that have gone through justice. And now he's sort of sitting, trying to sanitize his birthing of that entire genre of behavior, as well as content making. So good luck to him getting clean from that.
Sanitization, I think, is a good word for that. Yes.
But again, for somebody to act out like this, just to set him up to kill him, this is the first time I've seen something exactly like this case.
Yeah, and it was so methodical, right? I mean, the prosecutor said
he's just set them up to kill them. But he had someone kill themselves. So the reason his show got cancelled was because he set someone up and they killed themselves. So he has blood on his hands too, or his show does, and him as the forefront of that. So yeah. It's weird again that he would sanitize himself from that fact, because it's a fact in his own history. Not the same, but very similar.
To be a child, seems like he was able to convince him to meet up, because I think the shooting happened at 3:50 in the morning, early hours of the morning. So that idea of using that,
I don't know how long he had been chatting, whether he was supposed to be somebody who is a fast mover. And the problem with these cases, with all vigilante cases, even the ones who aren't which are not this extreme, is that we don't know what methods were used to lure this guy, and obviously here, the real case is the alleged murder. But I've never seen anything quite like that.
Well, apparently these communications, according to the prosecutor, they were very sexual in nature. They were talking about the victim's past. The idea was that they were going to meet up at this park to engage in some sort of sexual activity. So whatever he was communicating, or allegedly communicating to Showers, again, it seems
right. I mean, clearly, what the victim in this case was communicating is illegal and violates laws, just to have that conversation with somebody who, you think is underage. The question is, how are those statements obtained and who made what representation first, and you don't know those details, and I'm just talking about for the prosecution of the
Right.
And this is just generally it goes to like different legalities in different jurisdictions. For instance, in one jurisdiction, it may be illegal, for instance, for someone to be chatting with. So in Canada here, for instance, child luring, there actually doesn't need to be a real child. But in other jurisdictions, there might need to be for, exploitation like this. So no, so there's a very fine line, and I kind of agree with Hansen here because, in different jurisdictions, this is a different type of crime, and it's handled differently. But overall, I mean, generally speaking, chatting with a minor on the internet is illegal and wrong and should be condoned. But
Condemned.
yeah, I mean, we're talking about most of the time these kinds of issues playing out in a courtroom sometimes, or it doesn't even get to a courtroom because most of the time these people, if they get charged with an offense, then they are most of the time, I would suggest, pleading guilty because they are, feeling somewhat shamed and they don't want to fight, and exercise criminal rights like that. But this is sort of a huge epidemic on YouTube with these groups. We actually did a review of these groups, I want to say at the beginning of Defend, and we started counting them, and I think we lost count or track, but I think there was well over 150 of these groups around the world doing this kind of activity, and it was growing at the time. And it was just like, YouTube was kind of feeding this, and YouTube has been kind of sort of the intermediary here that, I don't think see themselves as supporting this, but generally speaking,
they're creating a monetized job out of this.
Oh yeah. Basically. And what you'll see if you watch those kinds of videos is they'll be very sanitized. They'll have like the word pedophile removed, they'll bleep it out so that they won't get demonetized. Mm-hmm. Which really kind of speaks to the motivation to most of these people that are doing this kind of activity, which is this is a great way to get famous for most of these people. This is a great way to, be, showing people your virtues and virtue signaling that you're a great person and that you're this dark knight hero and vigilante that should be adored. And that's why a lot of these groups are doing this. That's truly what I think is kind of the motivation there. What are your thoughts around that, Faye?
I feel that is a real slippery slope because this generation coming up who have grown up online, are going to have a very big difficulty with navigating their childhood in adulthood. Sorry, I'm just going to have to get rid of my dog for a second. Oh my God. God, he's eating so loudly. What was we saying? Talking
about these predator catching groups.
Yeah, I can't remember what I was saying.
So I take it that have you seen any of these predator catching groups and their videos?
No, I do know of it though, and I know in the UK it's actively frowned upon, and
oh yeah,
like really is told as you're wasting resources. Please do not do this. It's dangerous. You're not helping. It's not saving any children. Please stop. So for it to be such big business, that's what we're talking about. They've made it into big business, and now there's more and more people that think, oh, I can do that. And they're not going in there with a frame of mind or a journalistic ethic or a group of morals that keep everyone as a human being and and an investigation rather than a entrapment or just a pile on, or just like active harassment of someone who's just trying to live by their conditions after they've gone through the justice system. So for him to be, paving the way, and that was the thing I was saying. This next generation who are going to have such trouble with their childhoods and teenage years. They're going to be absolutely victims to this kind of thing, because the ability to come to terms with having media of yourself or other people in peer groups or whatever, and that experience with active like making of imagery or media can be really difficult for a person to navigate as an adult, and it can cause things like paedophilic obsessive compulsive disorder, and that could have someone inadvertently trying to work out whether they're a risk, or that they if they are attracted to a child, and it's something that really gets shrouded over. So we're not talking about all these issues that really could make the difference, rather than concentrating on something that's growing, that's actively making it worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just want to emphasize here that predation on a fictional child is not minor attraction. And just kind of re-emphasizing a statistic or sort of a misnomer that we've heard a lot of, which is, just because, most people that are acting on harming children are not actually minor attracted, that
Yeah.
they're opportunists.
Yeah. Or
They
they're acting out because they can't deal with whatever's going on inside. They act out in a bunch of ways, and one of them happens to be child sex offending, even if you're not sexually attracted to children. But the second fact is the biggest cohort of people who are making and distributing sexual abuse and child sexual abuse media are children, our peers, our teenagers. So that's why this next generation are going to have such problems with their childhood, because they've been looking at all sorts of porn and manga and trying to relate to self, and they have all of these and increasing levels of on the spectrum and neurodivergency, and that all sort of interweaves in this inability to find self or relate to self, and that will all become problems for this next generation, and we're not really preparing for that in any way, shape, or form. We're criminalizing them for what really is. And I know it's against the law, but actually for them, it's perfectly usual pubescent behavior among their generation, but it happens to be criminalized. So how do they, as without the prefrontal cortex even fully formed, let alone if they've got a threat response or neglect or trauma or a disorder or autism or whatever, their learning difficulty that they're navigating on top, that really impacts their ability to always make good decisions. And I think our next generation, this one coming up, needs so much help with this, and people don't even realize that this is a thing yet. So we're already losing them.
Yeah, so we have a support group for people that are minor attracted. If you're dealing with these kinds of issues, it's 1 hour a week that we set aside for this support group. It's anonymous. It is something where if you feel like, and you need to be 18 plus to attend the group. So as Faye was just kind of talking about, we don't deal with minors that are dealing with this kind of issue, unfortunately.
There are other charities that do, but our
Right.
one.
There are other supports out there and resources, and definitely we can point you towards those. But for adults, if you're feeling attraction towards minors, please reach out. You can sign up on our website, HelpUsDefend.com, and you can attend our weekly support group. And again, it's anonymous. You can join from anywhere in the world. It's all virtual here on Zoom. And That's it for today. Faye, any last closing thoughts?
Well, if there are any teenagers who are worried about their behavior online or between peers, Lucy Faithful Foundation in the UK is brilliant. Prostasia in America is brilliant. Reach out to any of the charities that talk to kids, Life for Children. There's loads of charities out there that are specifically trying to make a safe space for teenagers to talk. And we're making a safe space for adults to talk, but we spoke about teenagers, so I did want to just put that little bit of care package in, that they've got somewhere to go, and really it's a big thing, so do reach out. If you're struggling with any of those things and fearing something, go and get some support and some help.
Yeah. Thank you today, Faye, for your time. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Go on our website, HelpUsDefend.com, if you want to learn more or sign up for the support group.